Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thank you. We only have a short time together, so I want to make sure we maximize that. My name is Natalie Sampson. I am a co-lead for the Community Engagement Core of what's called the M-LEEaD Center, or the Michigan Center on Life Stage Environmental Exposures and Disease, a bit of a mouthful. And I just want to recognize our work is truly guided by our advocacy board, and that comes with representatives and leaders from a lot of local organizations, including Eastside Community Network, Eastside Community Action Network, Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, Detroit Health Department, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Sierra Club, We the People of Detroit, Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, Ecology Center, Chas Center, and Green Door Initiative. So this is part of a series called Residents and Researchers. We really like to focus on action-oriented, solutions-oriented, environmental health and justice issues and research. And I can share the link, but we've done past webinars covering our air quality standards, disaster preparedness, healthcare waste, immigrant worker rights and health, water affordability, and many, many more. So we'll share those videos. This will also be recorded. And we have to give a shout out to the National Institutes for Environmental Health Sciences who fund our center and also make this possible. So today we're going to hear from two guests as you all joined us to hear a little bit about soil contamination. Particularly, we're going to focus on lead, but recognizing there's other chemicals and heavy metals we're concerned about. And we're going to try to leave about 10 to 15 minutes for some Q&A. So just to really quickly set the stage, we want to think about what's in our soil, what's in our parks, what's in our gardens, what's in our yards. And you might know that this is actually National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week. Ari, our guest, purposely suggested we plan it this week so we could raise a little bit of awareness and talk about solutions. And those of you coming at this from the environmental health side, we know that children are particularly vulnerable in terms of how they're ingesting, how they're breathing, but also just in their behaviors and what they're exposed to. So we really want to bring up some of these public health issues as we're talking today. Lots of sources, lots of exposure pathways. We want to also talk about how residents and policies, respond to this. And so we're going to invite both of our speakers to talk. First, we'll start with, we have Rachel Marquez and she's the environmental justice organizer at the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, followed by the Winship Distinguished Research Professor of Environmental Sciences at Emory, Ari Saikawa. And so I think Rachel's going to kick us off and ground us a little bit in just thinking about these issues in Metro Detroit. So I will hand it off. Feel free to throw questions in the Q&A to us as we're going today, and we'll try to circle back to all of those. So, Rachel, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Natalie, for that introduction. My name is Rachel Marquez. I'm the Environmental Justice Community Organizer with the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. We are a community-based nonprofit that works to serve the Latinx community within Southwest Detroit, but also Southwest Detroit as a whole. We have a collective vision of creating life-changing opportunities for youth and their families. But I operate within the community organizing and advocacy team with DHDC, and our more centralized mission is to raise consciousness, give support to, harness collective power, and strengthen Latinx communities throughout Michigan, with a particular focus in Southwest Detroit by organizing activities that build community, increase local leadership, and mobilize our gente, our people, towards transformation and liberation. All that to say, as a community organizer, it is my job to listen to and to understand the concerns of the community that is here. What are we experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and why? And my job is to respond to that the best I can as an individual, connect them to resources and provide assistance, but more so than that, be able to identify the larger systemic issues that are at play as to why it's happening in the first place, and build power by mobilizing our people to try and create that systemic change so we can get down to the root of the issue and be more proactive rather than having to just react to what is happening around us. So today I'm going to be talking about lead as well as the need for more extensive testing in the area. Next slide, please, Allison. So Michigan is no stranger whenever it comes to lead contamination. The most known crisis that happened is with the Flint water crisis that began in 2014. This is when the city decided that they wanted to switch to a more budget-friendly route by switching over to a known contaminated source in the Flint River. And that water led to corrosion in the pipes that led to lead leaching into the water and it being served to all the residents there. And the residents knew that there was a problem. It was completely obvious. You could tell by just looking at the water that it was discolored, that something was wrong. In addition, their skin was burning, rashes were forming. So they knew that something was happening, yet the city was just responding and assuring them that it was safe. But luckily a resident stepped up and they had asked for assistance and reached out to a Virginia Tech water quality expert, and they formed a team to test the water for lead and found super high concentrations. And only then, when they had the data to back up their concerns, did the city, the state, the federal government take them seriously and provide assistance to them. And I don't want to talk about this like it is a past tense issue. The water crisis is still going on in Flint and residents are still being affected. The piping, they were supposed to completely change out all the lead piping and have that finished by 2020. It is now 2023 and that process is still ongoing. In addition, testing for lead still shows 9 parts per billion within their water. And that's less than the federal amount for them to respond to, which is 15 parts. So they're not receiving that federal assistance. But I want to be perfectly clear that being exposed to any amount of lead is dangerous and unsafe. And they are still experiencing the rashes and the burns that come with this, along with what we know, the nervous system issues associated with this. So this is still ongoing. But next slide, I'm going to talk about the issue a little bit closer to home for me in Detroit. So next, Allison. So us too in Detroit, we are an older city and we have the lead piping infrastructure that was there in Flint as well. So if something were to happen and it would corrode our pipes, lead would leach in and we'd be vulnerable that way. But in addition to that, a lot of our buildings and our homes are older and contain paint. Lead wasn't banned in paint until 1978, and a lot of our buildings are significantly older than that. So we're being exposed in our homes with cracked paint as well as the dust that comes with that. But also there are over 75,000 vacant buildings within Detroit that the land bank is working to demolish. And whenever you demolish that, the lead goes into the air as fugitive dust and we breathe it in and it becomes an air quality issue. But also as it settles into the land, it settles into the water and we're continuing to be exposed that way. So that's a Detroit issue as a whole, but centralizing even more in Southwest Detroit, we are overburdened by industries that are using these heavy metals in their process. In Southwest, there are over 150 polluting sites all congregated into that area. So I'm going to call a couple of those facilities out today. First being Cleveland Cliffs. They are a steel making facility who consistently go over their allotted air quality emissions and who poison the community around them with high concentrations of lead and manganese. I also want to call out the Edward C. Levy Company, who takes the slag byproduct from Cleveland Cliffs, and slag contains high concentrations of heavy metals, including lead, and crushes that into making cement. And they are also a consistent violator and have received a number of violations, yet they still ask for more. There is an active application where they are requesting to build another a slag crushing facility in Delray area, an area that is still overburdened by the same things. So that is an instant no from the community. But in addition to that, they are manipulating the data to look like the effects would be less than they actually would be by using air monitors that are further away from the site than what they could be. So that is a complete injustice. And I do want to say that this application is still open. Public comment was supposed to have ended yesterday, but has been extended until the 31st. So if you're listening, I highly want you to submit a public comment against this application so we can stop yet another facility from poisoning our community. Next slide, please. So what is Michigan currently doing whenever it comes to lead testing? A new thing and a new celebration is that it has been universalized for lead testing in children at 12 months and at 24 months. This is a state law. I want to give a huge shout out to our partners at the Ecology Center and others who have been working tirelessly on this issue, trying to get it passed. And this is a huge step in the right direction. But I do want to say that this is being a bit more reactive to the problem. Whenever we find that children have lead concentrations, they've already been exposed. So that harm has already been done. And we need to be more proactive in preventing that exposure in the first place. So the city and the state needs to do a better job of doing that soil testing, of doing testing around so we can stop our children and stop ourselves from being in those environments in the first place. And so I want to give a shout out to Keep Growing Detroit, which is a local organization here in Detroit who focuses on urban gardening. And before they start any project, they always do lead testing of the soil to make sure that it is safe. But extending just beyond their own projects, they also open this up to the community. So if they're gardening or if they have some soil they want to get tested out for lead, they'll do that for a low cost charge. And this is awesome that the community is stepping up and providing assistance and helping each other out. But it's time that the city and the state does that too. Next slide, please. So I predominantly work in air quality issues, but whenever a case rises up where a resident is concerned about something else, it is my job to respond to that and react. So we received a call from a resident who was concerned about illegal chemical dumping in a place where children visit quite frequently. And she was concerned because she brings her kids there and she just wanted to know, is there truth behind this? Like, is the land safe? And we thought that would be an easy question and we took it on. We wanted to get that answer because it is an important spot for the community. So I took a sample, I asked the city, I asked the state, is this soil safe? Can y'all do testing to tell me if it is or if it isn't? And they left me with empty answers. They couldn't point to a direct method for me to figure out if it is safe. It was just vague and recommended that I go to private laboratories to get it tested. And so that's what I did. I called up numerous laboratories asking that same question. Is this soil safe? Can you tell me what is in it? And it's not as simple as that. They said that we need to have a pre-understanding of what is in the soil in the first place and test for things individually. And each of those tests come with a different price point. So they couldn't even guarantee what it would be to do a general testing. But like I said, Southwest Detroit has over 150 polluting sites. How are we supposed to know exactly what is in this land and narrow it down to a specific facility? That seems like an impossible task for me, and I'm in this field. Why can't a resident ask that same simple question? If my land is the park, is my home, is this safe? Why can't we receive an answer to that question? So that is my ask coming on to this call. If you are a researcher and you have access to these laboratory facilities who are able to do these kinds of tests that are more extensive, for you to partner with community-based organizations or partner with residents so we are able to ask that question. Is this land, is this water safe for us to use? And I will say that we have an amazing group of promotores here, community leaders who are actively raising community consciousness on issues like this and who are wanting to create that systemic change and partner with this. Because not only is it an injustice for all these for all these industries to be congregated into this small community that is predominantly Black, people of color and low income, it is also an injustice to withhold knowledge of what is in the environment around us. So that is what we're needing. Just like in Flint, Michigan, we're needing those partnerships with researchers so they can validate our concerns. And so the city and the state will take us seriously. So next slide. So this is my contact information. So if you are a researcher or if you are a government official and you have resources and what we can do to get answers, please reach out to me. We would love to continue doing this work. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks for the call to action. I did throw in Eagle's open comments, and you can scroll down. I think it's on page 4 is the levy one that Rachel was referring to, if you want to follow up on that. We're going to move to our next speaker, but certainly feel free to start using the chat or the Q&A to get some questions going from this first part of the conversation, and we'll leave some time at the end. So Ari, if you want to get your slides set up, it's all you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really powerful, Rachel. I'm so glad to be on this panel with you, and I'm so happy to be with you all talking about soil contamination. So my name is Saikawa, and I just want to talk a little bit about a story what happened in Atlanta, so that we can continue the conversation. But before that, I do want to disclose that I'm not a soil scientist. I really work on air. So my main research question has been, where are the emissions coming from, and what can we do about it, and what are the impacts? So I've been very fascinated by different types of emissions, especially like garbage burning and brick kiln emissions, and those that we don't necessarily see sometimes in the global north. But agriculture has really interested me a lot because it impacts both air quality and climate change. And so, as most of you probably are aware, agriculture produces all greenhouse gases and also air pollutant, that's ammonia. So that has led us to think a little bit more about the linkage between agriculture and health. And that's when we started thinking about urban agriculture where we live, and we realized that there are about 300 community gardens already before COVID. So we know that after COVID or during COVID, a lot of people started the community gardens or home gardens. And it was actually before the COVID time, but we were starting to really figure out, how does this gardening impact health, and why are we doing this gardening? And in Atlanta, there was a lot of food desert issues, and I do believe that that might be a similar thing in Michigan as well in some parts. When you don't have the fresh produce, you would be going to gas station, etc., to get some junk food with no nutrition. And what is the solution? The city was trying to create what's called Aglanta, agriculture and Atlanta together, so that in those food desert areas or food swamp areas, I think we now changed the term, where you don't have cars and you don't have the grocery stores within 0.5 or 1 mile of where you live, then that's called a food swamp or food desert. To mitigate that issue, the city of Atlanta wanted to lease the land so that there was more urban farming going on. And so what they tried to do was to have these lots available that were belonging to the city, and then have people come in to bid for these places, and then that the city would be leasing. But as we know, there is a lot of soil contamination issue, and then we were worried that if people were to come in without knowing what's in the soil, and we just heard from Rachel, it is sometimes very difficult to know if the soil is safe. And so we were wanting to just make sure that we could be confident that the land that is going to be having these urban produce or fresh produce in these urban areas were clean, safe of these contaminants. So the city gave us the permission to test the soil in these lands, and we were able to test the lots that were going to be leased. And in one of the lots that you're seeing here, it was an empty lot. We actually measured, we collected soil samples, and then the lead concentration in this area was more than 400 ppm, which is the EPA regional screening level. So the Environmental Protection Agency has this regional screening level to have it as a threshold where is the regulation level that's considered unsafe for residential areas. I do want to mention, though, that Rachel did make it very clear. Lead exposure, there's no safe level of exposure of lead for children. And so we believe that 400 ppm is still high, but and there is a lawsuit against that to make it lower. But we were concerned that this lot turned out to be 430 ppm. And I think we are all aware of this, and so we don't need to go through. I think what struck me about the rash that Rachel talked about, there is so much health impacts that lead exposure can produce on children. And I think what we really need to focus on is that if we don't test, we cannot tell. And some of these impacts, like headaches and I guess loss of appetite, we wouldn't know if that is coming from lead very easily. And I think the biggest problem is this developmental impacts that it can cause because of the signaling hindrance that the lead causes when it gets to the children's brain. And I do want to bring the environmental justice issue. I think that is the core of this problem. So at the top, you see a normal distribution. 6 million are gifted and 6 million are with intellectual disability. This is for the US children. If the children are exposed to lead, then this mean shifts to the left. And so we would have fewer children with who are gifted and more children that are with intellectual disability. And I think this is important that we remember that this does not happen to everybody equally, but those that are impacted by lead exposure are those in underserved communities that are already overburdened by other exposures as well. And so if we are putting those children at risk, this is an environmental justice problem. So because we were concerned about this area having this empty lot with high lead contamination, we were fortunate to be able to partner with a community organization called Historic Westside Gardens. We were matched by Hercules Community Engagement Corps at Emory University. And this is a very much low-income, primarily Black neighborhood. And what Historic Westside Gardens was doing was to have more urban gardens and community gardens in this neighborhood. So we were able to do the train the trainer program, so created a material like this so that the residents can actually help us sample soil together. I think that's very important. That it's not just the scientists going in, but the residents have so much knowledge, the history in the neighborhood and where the contaminants might have been. And so it is really important to know where we should be focusing on, and having the resident knowledge is crucial. So what we do is we create this decision unit where we think there might be contamination, and then we split into 30 rectangles. And then by making it this way, you will create 30 composite sample in one pan, and then you will create 3 of them. And then in the lab, we go back and then we sieve them. We put them in the oven and then we sieve, and then we measure for lead and other elements. What we found out by doing this with the residents, we were able to collect samples from different residential areas and agricultural areas like community gardens. So in this figure on the left, where we see 3 BCKs, those are background samples. So that was outside of Atlanta that we just went to collect in different farms outside of Atlanta. The residential sites 1 through 11 are with those are in the historic Westside neighborhoods. And community gardens, agricultural 1 through 5, or those where Historic Westside Gardens had community gardens in the community. You see there are 2 lines, orange line that's showing 75 ppm, that's the state gardening screening level, and the red line, that's the 400 ppm that I mentioned as the EPA regulation level. So it is a little bit confusing, but the 75 ppm is considered for gardening. At that time, that has now shifted up to 270 ppm. That's a separate story. I'm not going to go into that, but you can see that most of them are above the 75 ppm. And then 3 out of the 11 were above the 400 ppm. And for me, this was very concerning, and especially because one of these lots that had high lead levels was a children's garden. When we told the resident that this had high lead levels, that was what we were told, that this is a children's garden. Is that why they are having developmental issues? And this is also why that we need to be proactive, exactly what Rachel was saying. We can do so much. This does not have to be reactive. And by being proactive, we are saving the kids from being exposed. And so for us, this was a wake-up call. And if 3 out of 11 have the high lead levels, is that possible that it is in more areas? And so what we ended up doing with Historic Westside Gardens was to hold a tomato festival where we asked more residents to bring their own soil samples, just scoop about 6 scoops into a Ziploc bag. And then we had the video by the ATSDR that showcases how they should be collecting soil samples so that we can sample many more soil samples on the spot. And that was when one of the residents actually brought the slag sample from their backyard. Slag was already mentioned. It is a waste material coming from smelting. And in Atlanta, there apparently have been about 11 lead smelters. And when we shot this slag with our XRF, X-ray fluorescent spectrometry equipment, it had 3,000 ppm of lead. And so that was very clear that that was the source of lead, at least. We weren't sure then if that was why the soil was contaminated, but because of this information from the resident, we were able to go around the neighborhood and we realized that there were visible slag pieces everywhere. And we found out that the soil beneath those slag pieces also are very contaminated. So you can see that the average of the slag rock was about 1,200 ppm, and the soil apparently was a little bit even higher than that. And so this was enough. The data, we had enough, we thought. And then so we were able to bring it to the EPA and told them that this should be investigated. That was on Elm Street that you're seeing at the center of this map. And the EPA started the investigation, and then out of the 60 lots, more than a half of them were having high lead levels. And so they expanded the investigation area to this purple, and that was about 360 lots. And then still more than half of them that they tested had high lead levels. And so then they expanded it to a little over 1,000 lots, that's the green. And then now they expanded it to 2,097 lots, that is the pink. So now it became a Superfund site. They started cleaning up, and then it also got listed on the national priorities list. So now they're really trying to clean up, but we do see slag out of these places as well. And it is not, I think this boundary is rather, it's not scientifically bound. And so I do think that this is very important that we are aware that this is happening. And then if you are gardening, it's especially important that you make sure that your soil is safe. And we wanted to also, this touches on what Rachel was saying about universal testing. We were also stunned to find in the Metro Atlanta area that only about 25% of the children are tested for lead. And one of my students, Sam Dessler, she wanted to put this as to showcase how much of an environmental justice problem this is as well. And so this is the Metro Atlanta area with the background color in the median household income. So the lighter the color, the lower the median household income. And the size of the bubble is showing the proportion of the kids that are tested for lead. And the color of the bubble is the proportion of kids that are tested above 5 micrograms per deciliter. So at that time, when we were making this graph, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, their blood lead level threshold was 5 micrograms per deciliter. It is now lower to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. But we were pretty shocked to find that some areas in Atlanta actually have 13% of kids that have high blood lead level. And you also see that one of this area that is in a very wealthy neighborhood, it also has high blood lead levels among the kids. This was where we also found another Superfund site because of the slug dumping. And so we just want to make sure that people are aware that the slug dumping seems to be quite prevalent. So what we started doing was this, what's called community science soil shop you see on the right-hand side. This is what we did in the Tomato Festival to encourage everybody to bring soil samples, and then working with the scientists like us that have the equipment to be able to test on that spot. I think that's very important. And this is just a screening. This is not a fully, scientific testing, but it gives the power to the residents who are interested to know if the soil is free. They can just bring it, they can just collect it themselves, and then we can tell the results on the day of. We are also trying to understand if the kids are safe. What we've heard from this neighborhood is that there is no free testing for blood lead levels. And so we've been offering this blood testing with Tassel Plus that you see next to the backpack. And we wanted to have it with at the event that the church was offering offering the free backpack as a giveaway, so that we can let them know about this, what's happening in the neighborhood, but also to provide a free blood testing opportunity as well. I just want to showcase how the soil shop samples look like. So you can see that the Metro Atlanta area has quite a high soil lead contamination compared to other areas, but it is not just within the Metro Atlanta, and you're seeing some areas that's high in the upper Georgia too. And we think that it's very important that we do it in nationally, if possible, just before you grow food. So just to wrap it up, I think soil lead contamination is very common, and community engaged sampling led to this finding of a slag dump in the EJ neighborhood. And so I just really want to reiterate what Rachel was saying. I think the partnership between the community-based organizations and the scientists is really powerful. We provide different expertise, and I think only then we can really find the problems in the neighborhoods. And I think what's more important is that by engaging the community members, we were really able to get a lot of soil samples. That's not possible if only the scientists did this. And so I really want to see how this kind of testing can be done in different parts of the country. And again, working with community partners also led to different research questions that we never thought about. They were the ones that told us, what happens to those people that are not above 400 ppm of soil. I think Rachel was talking about the water case. That is the same for lead. Some residents are finding 394 ppm of lead in their backyard, but because it's not above 400 ppm, they cannot have the soils tested. So for those people, this is a completely unacceptable situation. Some of them have kids, like toddlers, and they know this is contaminated. And so for them, they were asking us, is it possible to do phytoremediation or something cost effective, or at least cost, rather than taking the soils out and really cleaning up, which is very, very costly. I just want to, I've been talking all the time, but I do want to make sure that a lot of my students are really behind this. And I really want to emphasize Sam Peters. He was the one that really took this on. It was supposed to be his very small dissertation chapter to finish his dissertation, but it just blew up, and it's now a super fun site. And I mentioned about phytoremediation. There were a lot of students that really worked with the community working on these different problems. We are now starting a new community-based project, and so that is called Community Engaged Children's Health Study. So I do want to thank them for their work that's currently ongoing. Obviously, the Emory collaborators and the Hercules Center that has matched us with the Historic Westside Gardens. And very importantly, I really do need to thank the government partners that have really made it possible to work with us on this issue, and most importantly, the community partners. Rosario Hernandez is the current executive director of the Historic Westside Gardens, and she is the champion in the neighborhood. She lives there, and without her, we wouldn't have been able to do this work. And Gil Frank used to be the executive director, and he really pushed us on sampling with the residents. And I do want to thank the funding institutions as well. And I think we are about time. And so if there are any questions, I'm happy to take, but I will stop here.
Thank you to both of you. What a great example. And I'm curious, you mentioned in our conversations before this that other communities were sort of taking up this soil shop concept. Did you want to speak to that at all? It sounds like it's sort of a bit of a little national movement that's taken shape.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So the New Orleans actually contacted us how to do that, and then we talked to them several times, and then they said that they were ready to do it, and then that was during COVID. And so it was very difficult. For us, COVID worked pretty well because we were able to set up the collection boxes, and people were already aware how to do that. And so there were quite a few soil samples that we were able to collect that way. But I think if it's new, maybe that wasn't a good idea. And I actually don't know if that actually took place or not. But that gave me the idea that it would be so nice if we're able to do it in different places. And so that's how I said, if we can do it together in Michigan and in Georgia, and then potentially in other places. I talked to some folks at Stanford, and I know that there is a lot that's going on at Johns Hopkins and also at Indiana as well. And so I think it would be really nice if we can coordinate and do it together so that more people would participate as well.
Absolutely. I underlined, you wrote unacceptable, it implicates air, soil, water in these policies that clearly we're not either enforcing or there's not enough protections for our children and all of us. So thank you for the work both of you are doing. There are some questions coming in to the panelists here. So I'll just start with one. Rachel, you spoke to this, that your role is to try to help navigate these situations. But if either of you want to elaborate a little bit more on, where does one get started if this is a concern they have? It sounds like you've had quite a runaround, Rachel, and yeah, just speak to that a little bit.
So don't stay silent about it is number one. Whenever it happens to us, we think we're kind of alone in these issues. So talk about it, talk to your neighbors, see if they're experiencing similar things. And then from there, you can kind of build power. But there are also community organizations like ours who it's literally our job to listen to these types of concerns and have these connections with people who are able to assist ideally. So don't stay silent. Please reach out to us and we'll try and connect to fix the issue.
Yeah, I cannot say I cannot echo better than about talking about this problem is so important, and I think making the community to come together, I think that's just so powerful. Everybody is so busy and everybody has other things to do as well. And so I think that's the biggest difficulty. If you're in an underserved area, this, environmental problems sometimes is not the priority, but then linking it to the children's health, I think that's hopefully going to make it more important. We still find it sometimes very difficult. They are so busy with the work and whatever they have to do. How can we make it work so that everybody is invested in this issue when there is so much that they have to go through? So I think that's something that we really have to keep in mind, especially for scientists. It's easy for us to think, well, this is such a big problem, like what can we do? But then I think like being together with the residents and understanding what their priorities are, I think that is just so important. And also the data, just getting back to the data, how can we actually get the data in a way that the federal agencies or local agencies can actually use? And that touches on some of the questions maybe, but I think that is very important. And then the scientists talking to journalists can be useful too. Wherever the pressure can come, I think the pressure needs to go to the same direction from different areas. So if the scientists can talk about it, the community organizations can talk about it, the journalists can talk about it, the bigger the voice, the better on the same topic, so that there is an attention.
Absolutely. Yeah, you started to allude to it, but this question of, I mean, I think both of you talked about this theme of community recognizing the concerns and the priorities and what strengths and weaknesses and challenges are, but also who owns that information and data and how do we access it? And so both of you, I think, have to think about how do we get this information out to people in a way that is helpful. And so I don't know if you could speak a little bit more, whether that's at these testing events where you're reporting back immediately in real time, or as you're trying to do this work too in Detroit, Rachel.
You can go ahead, Deary.
Okay, I'll start, and then you can let us know what you think is best, maybe. So what we do at the soil shop, it's very nice because we can give it right away, and so we give the numbers and we can explain if there is high values. But for those other sites where we did the train the trainer program, like we would have the residents collect soil samples in a bit more scientifically rigorous way, and then we would take the soil samples and then go back to the lab and analyze. And so for that, we did have a meeting with the residents and then talk about talk about the results together. But we first met with the leaders of Historic Westside Gardens and went over how we should do that. And then right now we are working on the report back for whoever participates in our community engaged children's health study, so that they will see where we measured the soil samples and then what the values are, and then comparing to the standard and what that means for health. But I think the giving back the data is so important, but making sure that that data is useful for them is very important too. So having the community-based organization and their input has been so important. But back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, that's the biggest struggle, right? Because even like partnering with the researchers, like a lot of the language is super scientific, and it will go over residents' head. And I am in these spaces, and it is my job to make it more digestible, to be able to understand the language, but be able to simplify it in a way that everyday people would be able to understand, and also in a language that is able to be understood. A lot of this information is just kept in English and is not translated to people who need them. So trying to break it down is really critical. And so partnering with organizations who are able to do that is a step, but also, like Harry said, like having these events and hands-on kind of learning as we do is a great way to be able to explain it and get community involved in these issues.
Tomato festivals. Absolutely. So we have another question from a grad student. So students who are looking to work with community organizations while in school or after they graduate, what advice do you have for them? So stepping away maybe from the specific topic of soil contamination, but just in general, this community-based and community-engaged partnerships that we're talking about today. If either of you have advice.
Come talk to us. We're always interested in volunteers, especially whenever you have a critical way of thinking about these issues and able to collect data in a certain way and be able to analyze that, especially if also you have the skill set to, like I just said, be able to kind of break it down and make it digestible. That is what we're needing. And so partnering with a community organization, even if it's just you as an individual, if it's you who are in a lab that you have access to within your university, whatever way, your skill set, your expertise, your knowledge is critical to us organizations.
Yeah, I will add that communication skill is something that you can really work on. you can see how clear Rachel is. And I think that is just so important. And I learned so much working with community partners, how important that is, both in writing and in speaking. I used to be a modeler, and so I wasn't really trained to talk to people. And I was very scared when we had to start working on this. I was like, I'm not trained to talk to people. And so if you know that's what you want, I think there are universities that's realizing the importance of this. And so I hope that you can take classes about the ethics of research, like how should we do ethical research and what does it mean to work with community-based organizations? Because I think there is still a little bit of a lack of training for scientists how to do this kind of research right. And so thinking about that and talking about it with your peers who are interested, and then if there is any course or courses available for you, I think that would be a really good thing to do during your MPH as well.
Great. You did have a hand up, but I think actually one of our advocacy board members, Irma, are you still on, Irma, or did you have to hop off? Maybe we can make connections after. Any other questions before we wrap up today, or any reactions between the two of you as you're listening to each other speak from these different parts of the country?
Yeah, I just want to say that it's awesome that y'all were proactive in reaching out to the community yourselves. It is so tiresome just being a community member and just trying to beg someone to listen to us and assist. So you being in a position that you are in to where you have these resources and then actively going to the community and saying, hey, like we're trying to help you is super powerful. And I hope that we can learn how to do that here as well.
I wouldn't say that we are doing a very good job. We do want to have a lot of soil shops, that there are so many times where we don't get a lot of soil samples. And so I think it's really important to, I would love to learn how we can get a partner like you that's really in the community. I think that is really important too. And I think raising awareness, not just about soil, but everything, in a more comprehensive way, I think that is also very important too. We are finding that paint in some homes, and people are concerned about water too. So how can we create a mechanism where it's a little bit more, not just one issue, but more thorough as well?
Fantastic. Well, we have just someone thanking you in the Q&A here, both of you, but looking for potential collaborations between Detroit and Atlanta. So we'll see what we can learn from each other. I also threw in the chat, we have the link to the M-LEEaD Center. There are quite a few videos from past webinars, and also the notice about the December 12th one, where we'll have Lucretia Berry-Daniels, who's a co-lead of our Community Engagement Corps and the executive director of Detroiters Working for Environmental Justice, with Nick Schreck, and they will be discussing potential legislation in Michigan related to environmental rights. So somewhat related to what we're talking about today, certainly. So I will leave us there for the day, and just thank you all for taking the time to be here, and thanking both of our speakers for sharing this important work. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.